my college roommate was Jeff Edison, who's the chairman of and CEO of Phillips Edison, which is a national mall company. He's built an awesomely successful business. And he and I talk all the time. And I called him up and I said, hey, Jeff, I'm thinking about hiring a recruiter. What do you think? And he said to me in his typical, caustic manner, he said, so do you think you're the best recruiter in New York City? And I said, no, I'm a broker. I'm not a recruiter. And he goes, well, does that answer your question about whether you should try and delegate the recruiting to someone who's a professional recruiter? And that conversation ignited us hiring and delegating in a way that we hadn't before. And I'm not saying every managerial hire we made worked perfectly. Sometimes it's a fit, and sometimes it isn't a fit, but we kept fitting talented people into our team, and a lot of them stuck. But we weren't afraid to put ourselves out there and to delegate to people and to trust people, and it worked.
What is going on, Next Gen fam? Welcome back to Mentor Momentum with Next Gen HQ. I am too excited to welcome this week's guest. We have an absolute force in the real estate world with over 3 decades of experience. He started his first company back in 1988, which consistently ranked New York's #1 investment sales firm in volume for 14 consecutive years. He's now the CEO of B6 Real Estate Advisors, a commercial brokerage firm he launched in 2018. And we have so much to talk about, everything from his acquisition of his first company to Cushman & Wakefield to his amateur boxing days. So I got to welcome him to the stage. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on Mentor Momentum with Next Gen HQ.
Awesome to be here, Andrew. Really happy to be here. And we love the work you do here.
We love the work you do, man. You're out here crushing it. I want to start with something I know our entrepreneurs will truly relate to and aspire to. This acquisition that you went through back in 2014, 2015 to Cushman & Wakefield. What was that experience like for you, building this business since 88, over the course of 2 decades plus, and then all of a sudden you're selling to a, much larger institution. How was that experience for you, both like mentally, emotionally, as like an entrepreneur, being able to give up your baby and get that, exit or buyout that everyone looks for?
Yeah, so it was all of that. The experience was all of that. We had very purposely decided to sell our first business, which was Massey, and we had decided to do it in 2014, the year that we actually executed. Our partners had been talking about a liquidity event for a while. We were 26 years old, and we got really lucky. We hired, backing up, the way we sell property and finance property is a very, very auction-like process where we go out to the whole world and let people know an opportunity exists, and then basically drive a controlled auction. Well, that's exactly the way we thought that we should sell our business. Why deviate from our culture and our method? So we hired an investment bank who packaged up the property. We were very public about it. So, as a services business, if you're going to make that decision publicly, you pretty much have to execute. So we were out on a limb, but we were, we got front page of the Wall Street Journal selling the business, marketing the business, selling the business. We got a lot of market exposure, and no one would have guessed how perfect the timing was, because there was great fear that the market had tapped out and that capital gains might be increased in 2015. So our numbers were off the charts, and the result was very positive. And Cushman & Wakefield, the buyer, strategically wanted to build a capital markets group like us. So we were plug and play for them.
Absolutely. As you then transitioned, you were at Cushman for a few years, and then you jump back into the entrepreneurial world with B6. What was that experience like for you? Did you have any, moments of doubt of, all right, I did this once, can I do this again? But, being able to jump into something, I think our founders always think about, that idea of a serial entrepreneur versus a one-time success. What was that experience like for you jumping back into the, beginnings of a new company?
Well, Cushman treated us like gold. But they announced they were going to sell themselves 3 months after they bought us. So job number one was being on the road show and helping them be a happily integrated guy,
Yeah.
and which was interesting and fun. But and then they were successful in selling themselves for $2 billion to TPG, Texas Pacific Group.
Yeah.
And but when that was done, it was one of those moments where started to feel the loss of our old business a little bit in terms of personally, I loved being a manager in that business, a coach, a mentor. And I always say that people make their own careers, but we had a hand in a lot of great careers. And that turned out to be less about money for me than it was about the fact that I loved hopefully having had a hand in a whole bunch of great careers. And those people are still out in the market, and I'm a huge admirer and fan of those folks. But I was looking around for something that could be impactful and that I would enjoy doing, and I really was displeased with the then mayor of New York, who followed Mayor Giuliani and Mayor Bloomberg. So we had 20 years of strong leadership. So I decided to run for mayor of New York, and in 2017, and that was a fantastic experience. I made some tactical errors where I didn't finish the race, but I loved doing it. I would have loved the job. But so when that was over, I was looking around and I explored a whole bunch of things, and really saw a new opportunity in the market that we had been in sales and debt, a new structure, a new way, and so we started a new business in 2018.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, I remember the race, man. I know you. Huge focuses on housing and homelessness and education, which all things that I think you pull on your years of experience. When you guys were starting B6, which for our audience stands for building by building, block by block. What was kind of the competitive advantage you were taking, and how were you looking at being able to continue to do real estate in what ends up being a crazy real estate space of New York City, which I'm glad I never had to touch when I was working in real estate, but kudos to you for being able to navigate the waters of New York. But as you guys started this new company, what was kind of the motto and the thesis that you were taking into the market in 2018?
Well, the old opportunity was still there because when we sold, the investment sales business became fragmented.
Yeah.
And there was no lead horse anymore. So we looked and said, well, there's a brick of gold on the sidewalk that we could potentially pick up again. But we also had just for a very short period of time started focusing on debt brokerage in New York. So the backdrop is this 3,000 building sales every year, but there are 200,000 buildings. So it's a very low velocity business. So the average person sells their building once every 39 years because there's so many taxes to pay. You're better off holding on. And but they refinance every 4 or 5. So there's 13,000 loans that are transacted every single year in the 5 boroughs, and it's about $130 billion of flow. So we said to ourselves, wouldn't it be good to marry those two disciplines together, sales and debt, with the same level of discipline that we operated in our first business? And after thinking about a whole bunch of things to do, decided to launch into this. It's not the same old company, but a lot of the foundational elements of the first business are here, including some of our best alums, which was helpful.
I'm sure. Well, I want to get back to this eventually, but first I want to take us way back to the very beginning of your career. And you're coming out of school, 20-year-old Paul. What is one piece of advice you'd give to that version of yourself looking back now?
So we made so many mistakes that we were trained to learn the hard way. And I think probably a big piece of advice for when you're in your 20s is think about what the market opportunity really is. My partner Bob Knackle, who is a legendary talent, and I informally teamed up when we were at CBRE. In fact, by coincidence, we both had worked for CBRE in our respective in our respective hometowns, mine of Boston, he in Northern New Jersey. And we had summer jobs at the company, and we got to know the company. We knew the business. CBRE is a fantastic paternalistic company. So we had learned about the way they run their business, and they run their business with a lot of discipline. They're where we got the idea for geographic territories. So we have each one of our teams focusing on a sub-market. They were not afraid to focus in that way, and it really benefited them. They also pushed us to think about only being on the sales side, meaning the seller representation side. Like in the M&A business, everyone wants to be representing the company that's selling. Yeah. The buyer representation business is kind of almost a different business. So we were trained in the discipline of really, really focusing on a micro market and really sticking to one business activity. And that really benefited us because New York was really the Wild West.
Yeah.
So I think the big lesson is, what is the market opportunity? The market opportunity for us, which we didn't even realize, was huge. We didn't have national competitors in our business. It was the Wild West. People were representing buyers and sellers. There was no structure. And by adding a little bit of discipline to the market, we and others, I think we changed the world a little bit. And so think if you're 20 years old and you're starting out in business and you've found a business that you think you really love, think about and dream about what is the market opportunity here. And you'll probably get to where you want to get to faster.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned one thing in the very beginning about mistakes and constantly making mistakes. And I think that's probably our favorite topic to talk about at Next Gen because, too many people talk about the successes and where you end up, not the trials and tribulations that happen along the way. Is there maybe one, I'm sure you said there's lots, but one that sticks out, one mistake that you made along your journey and a lesson that you learned from that?
Well, it goes back to what we were just talking about, which is what's your market opportunity? When we started out, we were really happy brokering the sale of buildings, but not thinking about that market opportunity, and we didn't think about how much we wanted to grow. So we start the business in 1988, and from 1988 to 2000, so for almost 12 years, Bob and I would say to each other at the beginning every year, okay, let's grow the business, whatever that defined grow the business is. And then we would go back to work. So we were like the baker in the bake shop. You've heard of those business school books where you've got one baker who works in his bake shop and the other baker works on his business, not in it. We were the bakers in the bake shop, and we were making a living. We were happy, but we were certainly not building a company. So we added, maybe a broker a year. So 12 years in, we have 12 brokers. Yeah. And we were grossing at that time about $5 million, which in New York City in a services business there are no profits in a $5 million services business to speak of. Yeah. And a national competitor came along and said, hey, we'll give you $6 million for your $5 million gross revenue business. And we said to them, why are you overpaying? And they said, yeah, you're right. We're overpaying because we're trying to go public and Wall Street's giving us a lot of heat about not having any New York City. And you have a great reputation, and we're kind of interested in your model. And so we shook their hand and said, okay, we'll sell for $6 million. And the minute we did that, we were sad. We realized all our dreams are gone, all our plans were gone. They were really nice people. It was nothing about them, but we were trying to think, how do we unshake their hand? And we're complete handshake people. Yeah. So there is no way to unshake someone's hand, but they did it. They called us up and said, so this is the spring of 2000. Look, the go public multiples just went south. We're just going to open up a little satellite. So deal is off. And they were really weirded out about how happy we were. And so then we sat down with ourselves and said, look, if we want to grow a business, we need a recruiter. And if we're going to hire a recruiter, we're going to hire en masse, we need a training director for consistency of service. And if we're going to hire a training director, then maybe Paul shouldn't be doing the books on the dining room table instead of playing with the kids on a Sunday afternoon. So let's get a controller and a CFO. And so this is 2000 to 2007, which after we got through 9/11, probably the best string of years that you could ever imagine. Yeah. So our revenue grew from $5 million to $57 million in a 6-year period. And then we were making some money. Yeah. So, and we learned, I'm not saying we didn't make mistakes during that run up, but a lot of them were glossed over by a good market. But the real thing that we learned is, and the mistake that we learned was, if you're really saying you want to build a business, you have to think about tactically how you're going to do that and at what pace you want to do that. So once we figured that out, we had a blast.
Absolutely. No, it makes a ton of sense to me. I love the analogy you gave of the, baker in the bakery versus working on the bakery. How were you able to step back after, 12 years of kind of running all the day-to-day yourself? You're in the bakery. How are you then able to be like, give up the control and trust that other people can do the job so that you can step back and look more at the high level working on the business?
My college roommate was Jeff Edison, who's the chairman of and CEO of Phillips Edison, which is a national malt company. He's built an awesomely successful business. And he and I talk all the time. And I called him up and I said, hey, Jeff, I'm thinking about hiring a recruiter. What do you think? And he said to me in his typical, caustic manner, he said, so do you think you're the best recruiter in New York City? And I said, no, I'm a broker. I'm not a recruiter. And he goes, well, does that answer your question about whether you should try and delegate the recruiting to someone who's a professional recruiter? And that conversation ignited us hiring and delegating in a way that we hadn't before. And I'm not saying every managerial hire we made worked perfectly. Sometimes it's a fit and sometimes it isn't a fit, but we kept fitting talented people into our team and a lot of them stuck. But we weren't afraid to put ourselves out there and to delegate to people and to trust people. And it worked.
Oh, what are your top tips as a manager? Like, how do you keep your people thriving and striving towards that, universal goal together?
So I think people fall into two buckets in generally, especially around a services business. You're either a player or you're a coach. And if you think about like the Yankees in its heyday with Joe Torre being the coach, and he was a good player. He wasn't the greatest player, but he was the greatest coach. And he coached Jeter and A-Rod and a whole bunch of talented people. And they needed a coach. And even people that great need coaches. So I think managerial style, I hope someday someone might say I'm something, I turned into down the road. This is something like a Joe Torre who really helped some really talented people. And I viewed myself as a kind of a servant leader to everyone at our company. Hopefully they always felt like I acted and managed like I was working for them. You never want to have the attitude that they're working for you. That's very dangerous. You have the attitude that you're working for them, you're in a great place. And I think a lot of the managerial stuff that we did, even with our top, most highly functioning people, was really probably holding a mirror up to them. I would get our top salesmen coming to me all the time for advice. And a lot of times they already had the answer. I just was the mirror, and they talked themselves out and went back and knew what the right decision was just by, a strategic conversation where I actually had nothing to do with giving them the answer. Yeah. But the fact that you can be a mirror for people and let them look into their own heart or their own soul in some cases really helps people a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes so much sense. I've heard it as, you could kind of be like the dictator or like the sensei, it's like one person comes and you're telling them what to do versus you're just giving them wisdom and they figure it out on their own. So it seems like you really are being that mirror, that, guide versus, being, it's such a powerful leadership style. Go for it.
No, I just get off an operations meeting for B6, and the head of our marketing department just was telling everyone that she put two of her team up in front of the COO to make a presentation about an initiative she was working on. And she decided, I'm just going to let them swim. And she didn't say a word in the whole meeting.
Wow.
And it was so key. And they did extremely well because obviously she has talented people working with her. Mm. But I just said to her after the meeting, I said, that is power. Listening is power.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Paul, we've somehow made it close to the end of our time here. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask you your thoughts on the real estate market currently to finish us off, man. I mean, we're in a very interesting time. Some people say there's, another housing bubble. Anything you can share. I don't want you to give away confidential information or the secret sauce behind you guys, but what are your general thoughts right now on the real estate market?
I think we're going to have euphoria. I think that there's been a pandemic in New York City every century, and after every pandemic, the city comes roaring back. The Roaring 20s were a period of time following the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918. I mean, look, in 1600s we had cholera, in the 1700s we had typhoid, Spanish flu, 1918. Now there's a housing shortage in New York. There's a condo, luxury condo minor glut, but that'll be absorbed. But there's a housing shortage, so I think the housing market's going to boom. I think the work from home thing is a complete fad. God bless the people who want to do it, but I think people are going to come rushing back to work. The office market's going to be great, and the retail market's going to be good too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for everything you shared, all the way from your insights from early on at the first job to the sale to even your take on the real estate market. It's been a true pleasure to have you here on Mentor Momentum with NextGen HQ. That was Mentor Momentum, sharing life and business lessons from incredible leaders. Looking for more momentum? Subscribe to our weekly Momentum newsletter at nextgenhq.com and check out our other podcast, Momentum Audio, on any of your favorite podcast channels. Now that's momentum.